The road was nothing more than a scar across the basin, narrow, cracked, bone-dry, from weeks without rain. No signposts, no names, no reason for anyone decent to be this far from anywhere, just dust, dusk, and the kind of silence that clings to your skin. The sun had dipped behind the hills by the time they slowed the rig down. It wasn't a real wagon anymore, just the skeleton of one, beaten into something uglier, with a sputtering engine bolted to the back like an afterthought. It didn't stop fully, just rolled long enough for them to open the door and toss me out like garbage. Boot hit gravel first, shoulder followed, then my back, then the back of my damn head. I remember the sound more than the pain, that dull thud of skull on stone, the kind that leaves your ears ringing and your pride bleeding. I didn't scream, just grunted, let the ground take what was left of me. The rig didn't wait. Its engine coughed smoke and spite as it roared off, rattling into the low hills. I watched the rear window flicker like a dying candle until it disappeared. Just me and the darkening sky. Just silence and blood in my mouth. I didn't move right away. Felt like my ribs were still arguing with gravity. My coat was torn at the shoulder, my hands scraped raw. Blood trickled from one eyebrow, stinging the corner of my eye. I coughed. Dirt and iron mixed on my tongue, spat it out. Sat up slow, arms worked, legs too. Nothing broken. Hurt like hell though. I blinked hard, trying to clear the red from my left eye. The back of my neck burned where they'd dragged me. They didn't even take my boots, just kicked me out. Like I was nothing. I don't know exactly why they did it. Maybe it was old grudges. Maybe it was just who I used to ride with, or what I wouldn't keep quiet about. Doesn't really matter now. What mattered was I wasn't welcome in that camp anymore, wasn't safe near them, wasn't stupid enough to go back. So I wiped my face on my sleeve, slow and shaky, and stood. Cabin wasn't close, but it wasn't far either. I knew the land, better than any map, and there was still just enough light left to move. One boot forward, then the other. The desert stretched wide and still, the kind of quiet that presses on your ears. Breeze hissed through the dead grass, tugged at the wire fences that hadn't held anything in years. Sky turned dark quick, like it didn't have the patience to linger. My ribs throbbed with every step, but I kept moving. I didn't have a choice, not really. Shelter, water, fire, that was the list. Nothing else. I don't remember how long I walked before I saw her. Could have been half an hour, could have been more. Time gets strange when pain's your only company. At first I didn't even register what I was looking at. Just a shape, slumped low against a fence post near the edge of a dry patch of grass. Easy to miss if you weren't looking. Hell, easy to miss even if you were. But something in me stopped. I don't know what it was. Maybe the stillness. Maybe how wrong it felt, like she'd been forgotten by the whole damn world. I stepped slow, quiet, narrowed my eyes. She was barefoot. Dirt streaked across her arms and legs. Her dress was torn at the hem, twisted around her knees. One leg folded under her at the wrong angle. Her chest moved barely, lips parted. Hair hung limp over her face, tangled and full of dust. I knelt beside her. Her cheek was bruised purple, and there was a cut across her collarbone, clean but deep. Dried now, no fresh bleeding. The bodice of her dress was torn low, enough to show the upper swell of her chest, the sharp rise and fall of her ribs. Her breathing was fast, uneven. She didn't wake, didn't flinch. I stared at her for a long moment. Something inside me twisted. It wasn't pity. It wasn't attraction. It was something heavier than both. Something close to recognition. Someone left her, just like they left me. I looked around. No wagon, no horse. Just a fading trail of boot prints in the dirt, headed south. Fresh enough they hadn't been there a full day. Whoever did this, maybe it was the same ones who tossed me out. My mouth was dry as bone. I hated decisions like this, hated the weight of it, but I couldn't leave her, couldn't step over her and keep walking. I didn't ask myself what happened if she died. I just bent down and picked her up. She didn't fight, didn't speak, but she wasn't dead. Her weight folded into me, warm, not limp, just unresisting. Her skin was fevered or sunburnt, maybe both. Her hair smelled of old perfume and dust. I didn't linger. I just turned toward the hills, shifted her in my arms, and started walking again. If this story touched something in you, if you've ever felt lost, left behind, or clawed your way back to something like home, go ahead and hit that like button, leave a comment, and subscribe to the channel. There's more to come. Some stories just need to be told slow. And this one's only just beginning. I don't know what made me stop. Maybe it was the way the wind died all at once, like it was holding its breath. Or maybe it was the ache in my ribs pulling my focus down and close. But I saw her, off to the right, just past the fence line. A slumped figure leaning against a post, half swallowed by dusk and dry grass. I almost walked right past her. Hell, most men would have. She wasn't moving. Wasn't making a sound. Could have been part of the land itself the way she folded into it. But something made my feet still, made my eyes squint against the lowering light. Something wasn't right. I stepped off the path slow, boots brushing against brittle weeds, every breath feeling too loud in the quiet. My legs were sore, but I crouched anyway, close enough now to see her clearly. Her dress was torn, not from wear, but from hands, rough ones. One strap hung useless down her arm, the fabric gathered wrong around her waist, like someone had yanked at it without care. Dirt streaked her arms, her chest, one foot bare, the other still wearing a worn-down boot that looked too big for her. Her skin was dusted with the kind of grit that comes from being dragged. I'd seen it before. I'd worn it myself just an hour earlier. Her face was bruised along the cheekbone, swollen purple and blue. A cut traced her collarbone, long and dry, like it happened hours ago. Her hair hung in front of her face in clumps, stuck with sweat and sand. She looked like she'd been thrown there, not left gently, not set down. Dumped, like they did me. I didn't say anything, just watched her chest rise, fall, rise again, fast but uneven, still breathing, still here. I hadn't expected that. Not out here, not like this. She didn't look like she was from this land. Something about her was too soft, or had been once. Her dress might have been fine once too. Maybe silk, maybe stitched by someone who cared. Now it clung to her in tatters, and all that softness was coated in pain. But there was a stillness to her, not fear. Not anymore. Just surrender, like she'd already decided the world wasn't going to offer her anything worth staying awake for. I swallowed hard. My mouth was dry. My hands were shaking before I even touched her, not from fear, from the weight of it, the choice, the knowing that if I lifted her, I'd be carrying more than just a body. I'd be shouldering a past that wasn't mine, a story I hadn't asked to step into, but I couldn't leave her. My body already knew that. My mind was still catching up. I leaned in closer. "Miss?" I whispered, not expecting an answer. "Can you hear me?" Nothing. Not a flinch, not a twitch of the lips, just breath. Shallow, fast, stubborn. I sat back on my heels, staring at her face. Something inside me pulled tight, not pity, not even rage. It was familiar, that look on her face. That slack-jawed quiet that comes after the world's taken too much from you too fast. I stood slowly. My ribs screamed at the movement. My back spasmed once, sharp and deep. I gritted my teeth, reached down, and slid my arms under her. She was warm, too warm. Fever maybe, or just the heat that clings to skin when someone's been left too long in the sun. She didn't wake, didn't resist. Her body curled toward mine like it remembered how to do it, like safety was a thing she'd once known. Her head rested against my chest, her breath ghosting through the torn flap of my coat. Her hair brushed my jaw, smelled like old perfume and grit. I held her steady, adjusted my grip, and turned toward the hills. Cabin wasn't far, half a mile maybe, uphill. The trail was rough rocks, dry brush, gullies that'd twist a man's ankle in the dark. But I walked, slow, careful. Every step jostled my ribs, sent a fresh pulse of pain through my side, but I didn't stop. Every few minutes I checked, watched for the rise and fall of her chest, listened for the sound of breath. Still there, still fighting. I didn't know her name, didn't know what was done to her, but I knew what it felt like to be thrown away. I knew what it looked like when someone stopped expecting to be helped, and I couldn't be another man who walked past, so I kept walking, through the quiet, through the ache, through the thick weight of whatever it was that settled on my shoulders that night. She didn't ask for me, didn't cry or plead or beg. but her body stayed close to mine, and I swore I felt something in it loosen, just a little, like part of her knew. Maybe this time, she wouldn't be left behind. The trail home felt longer with her in my arms, not just because of the weight. She wasn't heavy, not really, but because every step felt like a promise. I didn't know her name, didn't know who she was running from or what she'd been through, but I knew she hadn't been left out there by accident. The cuts on her skin, the tear in her dress, the way her body leaned into mine like she didn't care if I dropped her or held her. It all told me enough. She'd been hurt, abandoned, maybe worse. And now she was mine to carry, mine to keep breathing. That's what I told myself with every mile. The cabin finally came into view through the trees, just where the land creased into the hill. It wasn't much one room, thick wood walls, a rusted latch on the door, but it was standing, still warm from the sun that had baked its bones all afternoon. I stepped onto the porch, shifted her weight gently in my arms, and leaned my shoulder into the door. It opened easy, just like it always did. Inside, it was dim, the kind of darkness that sits quiet until the fire wakes it. I laid her down soft on the bedding by the hearth, didn't drop her, didn't let her fall. Just eased her down like glass that might crack if I moved too quick. She didn't stir, her head lolled slightly toward the wall. A little breath escaped her lips, the smallest sound. It hit me harder than I expected, a whisper of life where I wasn't sure I'd find any. I knelt there for a moment, just looking at her. My knees ached, my back throbbed, but I didn't move. Her dress had fallen off one shoulder, collarbone exposed, dark with bruises. There were fresh ones along her thigh, too, some purple, others black and angry. Her ribs rose and fell fast beneath the torn fabric. She looked like someone who'd been erased on purpose, not just forgotten. I stood slowly, body stiff from the walk, and took off my coat. Hung it on the peg by the door like it mattered, like routine could keep me grounded. Then I moved toward the hearth. The cold stone reminded me how late it was, how quickly the desert air turned sharp after the sun dropped. I struck a match and lit the lamp on the table. Warm amber light spilled out, dancing across the bare walls, catching on the edge of her skin. I built the fire next, hands still shaking a little. Not from the cold, not from pain, from something else. Fury, maybe, or the kind of quiet grief that sneaks up on a man when no one's looking. She was still breathing. That was enough for now. I pumped water from the basin near the stove. It took a few tries. My shoulder burned from where they'd thrown me out of the wagon, but I got the kettle filled, set it on the stove, lit it. The flame flared to life, steady and blue. I stared at it for longer than I meant to, letting the sound fill the silence. I looked back at her. She hadn't moved, still curled into herself like her body was afraid to unfold. Her hair was tangled around her face. Her lips were cracked. She didn't have a bag, didn't have a name. Just bruises and silence and a heartbeat that hadn't quit. I grabbed a clean rag from the shelf, dipped it in the warming water, and brought it over. Sat beside her again, slow, careful. My knees popped when I bent them. I winced. My ribs hadn't let up since I hit the dirt. Still, I reached for her. I hesitated. Whoever left her didn't care if she lived. Hell, they probably hoped she wouldn't. I didn't want to be another hand she flinched from, but her skin was burning. She needed cooling. Slowly, I pressed the damp cloth to her forehead. She flinched, not awake, just reflex. A little breath escaped her lips again. "Easy," I whispered, though I knew she couldn't hear me. "You're safe now." I moved the cloth down to her temples, then her wrists. Her skin was soft beneath the grime, delicate in a way that didn't belong out here, in the dust and blood of the world. She looked like someone who used to wear nice things, someone who used to be seen. I didn't think about that too long, didn't let myself. Instead, I stood, walked back to the stove, and reached for the one shirt I kept clean, soft cotton, sleeves rolled, hung on a peg above the kettle. I brought it over and folded it beside her on the bed. If she woke, she'd have something to change into. If she didn't, well, I'd deal with that tomorrow. I didn't sleep that night, just sat in the old chair near the door, shotgun across my lap, eyes on her. The fire crackled low behind me. The wind outside picked up. Coyotes cried far off in the distance, long and low. I didn't care about them. I just kept watching her breathe. She woke just before dawn. It wasn't loud. There wasn't any gasping or sudden flailing the way folks sometimes do when they come out of pain too fast. No, it was quiet. real quiet, just a low sound, a kind of groan, soft and raw, like a wounded animal unsure if it was alone. I heard it before I saw her stir. I'd been sitting in that old chair near the door, shotgun across my lap, one boot braced against the floor, the other knee up. I hadn't slept. I never do, not much, not since before the war. My body stays tense even in stillness. I reckon it always will. She shifted a little, her face turning toward the faint light creeping through the shutter slats. Her eyes opened part way, then squinted against it, just slits. She didn't speak at first, just blinked slow, like she wasn't sure if she was alive or dreaming. Her breathing caught, then steadied again. I didn't move, didn't want to spook her. Just sat there and watched her ease back into the world. She tried to lift a hand but couldn't manage it. It dropped back to the bedroll like a bird with a broken wing. Her lips parted, dry and cracked. Then just above a whisper came her voice. "Where?" That was all. I rose slow. My body creaked like old wood, and the bruise in my ribs still flared every time I breathed too deep, but I didn't let that show. I crossed the room, keeping space between us, and knelt beside her again. "You're safe," I said quietly. "Cabin in the hills. No one followed you. You're not in danger here." She looked at me, or at least tried to. Her gaze drifted, unfocused. Then it fell down her own body. She saw the torn dress, the blanket I'd pulled over her, the clean shirt folded at her side. Her hands trembled when she tried to sit up. I reached out on instinct but caught myself before touching her. I didn't want to scare her. "Easy, don't rush it," I told her. "You passed out. I found you near the fence. Someone left you there." That landed. I saw it in her face. Her eyes sharpened, not clear yet, but hit with something hard, memory or pain, maybe both. Her mouth opened like she wanted to speak again, but she shut it, just lay there, breathing hard. I stood, gave her a little distance. "Water's warm, basin's in the corner. I'll step outside for a bit. Give you time," I said, and then I did just that, didn't wait for a reply. Outside, the sky was still the color of steel, pale blue just starting to stretch itself over the hills. The land was quiet, too quiet, the kind of quiet that makes a man feel like even his breath is trespassing. I walked once around the cabin, slow, letting the cold air scrape against my skin, trying to ease the weight in my chest. I wasn't nervous, not exactly. I've seen dying men, held the hands of soldiers with holes in their guts, fed soup to boys who couldn't lift their own spoons. I buried my niece with my own 2 hands after raiders tore through the plains and left her behind a smoldering barn. I know what it looks like when someone's got nothing left to hold on to. But this woman felt different, like she wasn't meant to pass through and disappear. Like her being here meant something more than just accident or coincidence. When I stepped back inside, maybe 20 minutes had passed. The fire had burned down low, but the warmth still held. I expected to see her curled where I left her, still weak, maybe asleep again. Instead, she was sitting up. My shirt hung loose on her now, the sleeves rolled, the fabric soft and oversized around her shoulders. Her legs were drawn under her, bare beneath the hem. The dress, the one she'd been found in, was folded neatly beside her, too torn to wear again. She'd brushed her hair back with her fingers. Her face was clearer now. Still bruised, still tired, but not afraid. When the door creaked open, her eyes snapped to mine, but she didn't flinch, didn't hide, just watched me. I nodded toward the tin cup near the fire. "Drink." She gave the smallest nod. I crossed the room, picked it up and brought it to her, handed it slow. Her fingers brushed mine as she took it, and that touch got it, hit something deep, like a ripple moving through old water. She drank, slow and careful, then set the cup down and looked up at me, really looked. "Why'd you help me?" she asked. Her voice was thin but steady. I pulled the second chair out and sat across from her, not close, not crowding, just enough to speak without raising my voice. "Seemed wrong to leave you," I said. "That's it?" I met her eyes, held them. "I've been left before. Hurts like hell." She didn't say anything after that, just stared at me for a long time, quiet as the grave. Then she gave a tiny nod, just once, said nothing else. The cabin held its breath after that. The fire crackled, and the wind pushed once against the walls, but inside it felt still, and for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like I was waiting for something awful to come through the door. I just sat there, watching her breathe, listening to the silence, and thinking maybe, just maybe, we'd both survived something we weren't meant to walk away from. She didn't speak again for hours after that first look between us, and I didn't press her. I never do. Some folks think silence means something's broken, but I know better. Silence can be safe. Silence can be choice. And right then, we both needed that more than words. She sat near the fire, cross-legged, my clean shirt draped around her like it was made for her, sleeves still too long, hem brushing her knees, the cotton soft against skin that had seen too much roughness. She pulled the fabric tighter when the breeze slipped through the cracks in the wall, but she didn't complain. Her eyes drifted toward the flames now and again, not staring, just staying close to the light, like she needed to know it was still there. I kept to myself, doing the small chores I'd put off too long, chopping kindling out back, patching a corner of the roof I'd ignored since the spring thaw. I wasn't in a hurry, the kind of work that gives your hands something to do, but leaves your mind free to wander. I'd glance toward the cabin now and then, door left cracked just wide enough so I could hear if she called out. She never did. By midday, I stepped back inside. The light had shifted, warmer now, stretching long across the wooden floor. She was still sitting there, same place, legs folded under her. The tin cup I'd given her earlier was empty, resting beside her on the floor. Her hands were tucked into her sleeves. She looked at me, not startled, just wary, like she didn't know what kind of man I was yet, like she was still deciding. "You hungry?" I asked, voice low. She hesitated, then gave the smallest nod, barely moved her chin. I didn't ask what she wanted, didn't think she'd answer even if I did. So I walked to the shelf, pulled down a tin of beans, and opened it with the old knife I keep beside the stove. No seasoning, nothing fancy, just something warm and real. I set it over the flame and stirred with slow, even circles, letting the smell drift across the room. She watched me, not in fear, not in suspicion, but like she was studying the way I stirred that pot, as if that would tell her something about the man she'd woken up beside. "You got a name?" I asked after a moment. There was a pause, like she had to remember it first. Then quiet, clear, she said, "Nora." I nodded once. "I'm Wyatt." She didn't smile, didn't nod, but now we weren't strangers anymore, not entirely. When the beans were ready, I spooned them into 2 small bowls, handed one to her careful, like she might flinch, but she didn't. Her fingers brushed mine again when she took it, warmer this time, not trembling. She ate slow, deliberate, eyes drifting every so often toward the window, like she was listening for footsteps that hadn't come. I didn't ask. I knew that look too well, waiting for something to ruin the quiet. "You ran from them," I said, not as a question. She took another bite, chewed slow, swallowed. "They weren't supposed to touch me," she said. "Just watch me, move me from place to place." I felt my jaw tighten, set my bowl down. "Who were they?" Her mouth pressed into a line. She looked at the floor. "Don't know all their names," she said. "One called himself Tucker. Another one Ed, I think. The boss was my stepfather." I sat back a little, let that word settle in the air. Her eyes lifted, met mine. There wasn't emotion in them, not right then, just a flat sort of knowing. "My stepfather," she repeated. "He sold me." She said it like someone who had practiced, like it was a fact she'd rehearsed until it stopped stinging. But I saw the way her fingers curled around the bowl. I saw what it still cost her. "I ran the first chance I got," she added. "They caught me. Didn't like that." I didn't ask more. Didn't need to. She looked like she was already dragging too much weight behind her. Instead, I looked down at my hands, then back up at her. "You don't owe me anything," I said, plain and steady. She blinked, like she'd been bracing for something else, some price, some catch. "You stay as long as you want," I told her. "If you leave, you leave. I won't follow." Something shifted in her then. Not trust, not yet. But a line of tension eased in her shoulders, just enough to notice. She finished her food, set the bowl aside, and without a word, she stood. Wobbly at first, like her legs didn't quite believe they still worked, she crossed the room, slow and quiet, and stopped at the basin. Washed her hands, deliberate, water splashed soft against tin. Then she turned and looked at me. "I don't want to leave," she said. I didn't speak right away, just watched her. Then I nodded, slow. "All right." I stepped outside again after that, let the screen door ease closed behind me. The air had cooled, shadows stretched long across the dirt. The sky was soft with late afternoon gold. Inside, she was near the fire again, wearing the shirt I'd given her like it belonged to her now. Her old dress, what was left of it, had been tossed into the stove. She didn't ask. I didn't bring it up. Some things didn't need words. She didn't sleep much that night. Neither did I. The fire burned low in the hearth, casting just enough glow to hold back the dark, and she sat close to it, legs tucked beneath her, arms wrapped around her knees. She didn't look cold. She looked like someone keeping herself together with whatever strength she had left. I lay on the floor by the far wall, coat rolled beneath my head, blanket across my chest. I didn't want her waking up in the middle of the night with a man between her and the door, so I stayed put, quiet, still. Watching the embers dim. We didn't speak for hours, didn't need to. It was enough to not be alone. Morning came slow, creeping in through the cracks in the shutters, painting long lines of gold across the cabin floor. I'd been up a while by then, moving careful, making coffee on the stove. Strong stuff, bitter as war. Poured her a cup and left it on the table near where she'd curled up. She hadn't moved yet, still wrapped in that too-big shirt, shoulders barely rising with each breath. Eventually she sat up, rubbed her eyes, brushed her hair back with one hand, and looked toward the window like she wasn't sure this place was still real. Then she saw me. "I didn't think you'd be here when I woke up again," she said, her voice rough, quiet like gravel under soft boots. I set my cup down, looked over. "Why's that?" She didn't look at me right away, just wrapped her arms tighter around herself. "Most men would have taken what they wanted, Mimamesh," she said, then disappeared. I felt those words settle in my chest like a stone dropped into a still pond. I didn't flinch. Just took a sip of coffee, eyes steady on hers. "I'm not most men." She watched me for a long moment, like she didn't quite believe me yet, but maybe wanted to. Then she stood, slow, walked barefoot over to the table, picked up the cup I'd left her. She took a sip, winced at the taste, but didn't complain, didn't set it down either. "You out here alone?" she asked after a while. I nodded. "No family no more." She didn't ask how, didn't need to. I said it in a way that told the story without the details. She just nodded like she understood, and maybe she did. "I had a mother," she said quietly. "She died when I was 12. After that, it was just him." "Your stepfather," I said. She let out a bitter sound, not quite a laugh, not quite a breath. "That's what the law called him. He called himself owner." I didn't say anything, just held her eyes. Then she looked at me different, really looked, studied me. "You don't talk much." "Don't need to," I said. "You always this careful around women?" "Only the ones who've been through hell." Something flickered in her then, surprise, maybe, or something softer. She stood, shifted the shirt around her shoulders. It slipped a little, riding high on her thighs, but she didn't cover herself, didn't flinch when my eyes landed there. She stepped toward the fire, bent to add a few sticks to the coals. I started to help, but she raised a hand. "I got it." So I let her. She moved slow, deliberate, placing each piece of wood like it mattered. Then she sat back on her heels and looked up at me. "You're going to ask what they did to me," she said. "No." She blinked. "Why not?" "Because you'll tell me if you want to," I said. "And I won't need to know if you don't." She looked at me like she didn't believe that kind of man existed. Maybe she'd never met one before. She shifted her weight, folded her legs underneath her again, and then she said it, voice steady, cold. "They never touched me like that." "Not yet." My breath caught, but I didn't move. "They beat me when I ran," she went on. "Said I'd be disciplined before they sold me again. Said I'd learn obedience, that no man would keep me unless I shut up," and smiled. Her face didn't change, her voice didn't crack, but I saw it. the way her fingers dug into the fabric of my shirt like she needed to hold on to something. I didn't speak, just clenched my jaw, let her have the space. "I think they wanted to break me," she whispered. "Make me easier to sell the next time." I stared at the fire. Rage flickered in my chest, slow and quiet, but hot enough to sear. "You should have left me," she said suddenly. "Would have been easier." I stepped forward then, not close, just enough. "I don't do easy," I said, "and I don't leave people behind." She looked up at me, eyes wide, something cracking just beneath the surface. "I don't know what I'm supposed to be now," she said, voice thin. "You don't have to be anything," I said, just as soft. A long silence hung between us, the kind that doesn't need breaking. Then, quieter than before, she asked, "Can I stay here?" I nodded once. "As long as you want." She looked down, then back up, her voice barely more than breath. "Even if I don't smile all the time? You don't owe me a damn thing." She stood. Her legs wobbled a little, but she held steady. Then she crossed the room slow and stopped just in front of me. Her fingers reached up, brushed the edge of my collar, then settled flat against my chest. "I don't want anything from you," she said, "but I don't want to be afraid of you either." I looked her in the eye. "I'd rather die than scare you." She nodded, then leaned forward, rested her head against my chest, and let herself be still. I didn't move, didn't breathe for a moment. My hand hovered behind her back, not touching, just near, and that was enough. Night fell soft, like a blanket pulled slow over the land. The stars came out bright above the ridge, sharp against the black sky, but down in the cabin, everything stayed quiet, warm. The fire in the hearth had dimmed to a steady glow, casting long shadows across the wooden walls. She sat near it still, cross-legged on the bedroll, her legs bare, arms wrapped around her knees, that same shirt still clinging loose to her shoulders. I watched her from my place on the floor, a few feet away, not touching, not crowding, just near. She hadn't asked for more than that, and I wasn't going to give more unless she wanted it. She hadn't gone back to sleep, just sat there like I did, the two of us sharing silence like it was language. It wasn't tense, it wasn't strained, it just was. And for the first time in a long while, I didn't feel the weight of needing to fill that space with noise. Being quiet beside someone is a different kind of closeness, one that means you don't have to prove anything. I could hear her breathing soft, steady, like the calm after a long storm. Every now and then she'd shift a little, stretch her fingers, glance toward the window, but mostly she stayed still, like she was trying to let her body remember what it meant to feel safe. I didn't sleep. Haven't really slept proper in years. Even with the door locked and the shotgun at arm's reach, my body stays alert. The war did that. Losing family did that. Nights like these used to be when the worst things happened. Men riding out of the dark, smoke thick in the air, fire catching before you even smelled it coming. But not this night. This night stayed whole. When the sun began to rise, soft and low over the hills, she was the first to move. She stretched her legs out slow, careful like she wasn't sure they'd hold. Then she turned her head toward me, just a little. "You ever think you'd have something like this again?" she asked, her voice just above a whisper. I didn't answer right away. Looked toward the window instead. The sky outside was brushed with light. Birds were starting to stir in the brush. "No," I said. "Didn't figure I deserved to." She nodded, like that made sense to her. Then she stood slow, still sore, but steadier than before, and walked barefoot over to the basin. She washed her face without looking at me, dried it on the edge of a rag hanging by the wall, then leaned her hands on the table. I watched her. Every motion she made was her own now. Nothing forced, nothing frantic. She was still quiet, still holding things close, but there was a kind of weight lifting from her shoulders piece by piece. I didn't say it out loud, but I saw it. The way her back didn't curve in on itself anymore, the way she didn't flinch at the creak of the wood. Then she turned and stepped out onto the porch without a word. I let her. She stood there in the morning air, looking out over the stretch of land like she was seeing it for the first time. I joined her a minute later, cup of coffee in hand, and leaned against the post beside her. The wind tugged at her shirt, lifting the hem just enough to brush her thighs. Her hair, still wild from sleep, caught the light. She didn't look at me, just said, quiet, "I want to help." I turned my head, met her eyes. "You don't have to." I didn't say I had to, she replied. I said I want to. That landed somewhere deep in my chest. I nodded, slow. All right. We spent the morning working side by side, splitting wood near the shed. She wasn't used to it. Her palms turned red within the first hour, but she didn't complain, not once. Just watched how I stacked each piece, how I braced my boots and did the same. There was a determination in her, sharp and quiet, like she had something to prove, not to me, maybe not even to herself, but to the world that had tried to strip it from her. By noon, her arms were sore, hair sticking to her cheeks, but she was still moving, still stacking. I handed her a tin cup of water, and when she took it, her fingers lingered against my wrist, just for a second, not by accident. Later, after we'd gone back inside and the heat had settled in full, she sat by the window, arms folded, looking out toward the horizon. They'll come, she said, voice even. I know, I answered. 3 men, maybe 4, she added. Not all of them dumb. I'm not worried about dumb, I said. I'm worried about desperate, she nodded, didn't argue. Then turned back to me and asked, You ever killed a man up close? Yes. She held my gaze. You think you'll have to again? If they come through that door, yeah. She watched me for a long moment. I didn't look away. Then she stood, her steps slow, deliberate, bare feet padding across the floor until she stood right in front of me. I don't want to be just some wounded thing in your cabin, Wyatt. You're not. I don't want to be saved like I'm broken. You're not broken. Her voice dropped to a whisper. Then why haven't you touched me? I swallowed. Because you haven't touched me. She looked at her hand, then up at me again. Her fingers reached out, trembling a little, and she laid her palm against my chest. Is this all right? She asked. I nodded. Yeah. Then she stepped closer, and for the first time in years, I didn't brace for the worst. I didn't pull away. I just let myself feel the warmth of her hand, the way her fingers curled slightly against the beat of my heart. She was choosing to stay, not because she needed a place to hide, but because she finally believed she didn't have to run anymore. The storm rolled in just before dusk, the kind that announces itself long before it arrives. Wind kicked up first, dry and sharp, scraping across the hills and rattling the porch tin. Clouds gathered low over the ridge, stacking gray and thick like smoke from a slow fire. I was on the porch, sharpening a knife out of habit more than need, watching the sky shift, feeling the change in the air, the kind of stillness that warns you something's coming. I wasn't looking at the storm, though. I was watching the thin thread of dust rising out past the horizon, faint but steady, like a snake winding its way toward us through the basin. Riders, 4, maybe 5, coming slow but straight, not the kind of men who knock first, not the kind who turn back easy. I stood, quiet, and stepped inside, closed the door behind me without a sound. Nora was already moving. She stood near the bed, sleeves rolled, boots laced tight around her ankles. That shirt of mine she'd been wearing for days now. It fit her like it belonged to her. Her hair was tied back. Her jaw was set. They're close, she said, not afraid. Just sure. I walked to the corner, grabbed the rifle, checked it, loaded. My fingers worked fast, not because I was nervous, but because they remembered. They always remember. My body may have gotten slower, but the part of me that once lived with death, breathing down its neck, that part stays sharp. She moved toward the crate by the hearth and pulled out the revolver I'd shown her a couple nights back. Checked the chamber like I'd taught her, no hesitation. You remember what I told you? I asked, quiet. She looked up, eyes dark and steady. I remember. I gave one nod, nothing more. Then we waited. The silence in the room was thick, not panicked, just focused. Nora stood near the front window, back to the wall, gun low in her hands. I took the far side of the door, rifle angled down, knees slightly bent. We could hear the horses now, hooves thudding against the hardpack, the low creak of saddles and the scrape of leather. Then a voice called out from the dark, "Don't mean no harm, just looking for someone." I didn't answer, didn't blink. Another voice followed, deeper. Girl named Nora Lee ran off with a man don't belong to her. We're here to take her home, nice and quiet. I turned to look at her. She shook her head once, No panic, just truth. "They won't leave," she whispered. "I figured." Another voice came, this one slower, more practiced. "Come out now, Nora Lee. No one's going to touch the man you're hiding with." She stepped forward then, toward the door. I caught her wrist, not to stop her, just to make sure. "You don't owe them a damn thing," I said. "I know," she breathed. Then she opened the door. The wind caught her hair. Rain had just begun to fall, thin and cold, pinpricks against the dirt. She stepped barefoot into the mud, the hem of my shirt brushing her knees. The men sat their horses 30 yards out, spread wide, Tucker at the front, Ed a little behind. The other two I didn't recognize, but it didn't matter. They all looked the same to me, like cowards riding loud to hide their fear. "You don't get to take me back," Nora said, voice steady and strong. "You don't own me. You never did." Tucker laughed from the saddle. "That's so." He nudged his horse forward. Didn't get far. I stepped out onto the porch, rifle raised. "Boy," Tucker said, holding his reins tighter, "you don't want to do this." I didn't say a word. Then Nora lifted her pistol, aimed it straight at Ed. Her hands didn't shake. "You come closer," she said. "I shoot first." Tucker looked between us. He saw it, the truth of it. We weren't bluffing. And worse for him, we weren't afraid. He spit into the mud. "Ain't worth dying over." Then he turned his horse. The others followed. No parting shots, no threats, just the sound of hooves growing fainter in the rain. Nora didn't move for a long second, just stood there, chest rising and falling. Her breath was loud in the quiet. My heart was louder. Then she turned, stepped under the porch roof, and walked into my arms without a word. I held her close, soaked and shaking, but not from fear, just from the come down. The truth of survival, after you've braced yourself to bleed. Inside, the fire still burned low. She dried her hair with a rag while I added water to the kettle. When I looked back, she was watching me. "You didn't stop me," she said. "I'd never stop you from standing up for yourself." She sat by the hearth again, legs pulled in. She looked tired, but not like before, not defeated, just full, like a fire still burning but controlled now, fed on her own terms. "I've never done that before," she said. "Not like that. You did clean." She looked at me a long time, then crawled across the room, slow and sure, until she was beside me. "I'm not going anywhere," she said. "I know," I answered, and I did. The storm passed sometime after midnight, leaving the world washed quiet. You'd never know there'd been a standoff hours before. No shouting now, no hoofbeats in the dark, just the soft breath of rain on the roof and the slow crackle of the fire inside. The kind of quiet that doesn't unsettle, it settles, makes things feel still in a way that isn't empty. Nora sat cross-legged on the bedroll near the hearth, wrapped in one of the old wool blankets. Her hair was damp from the rain, brushed back now into a loose braid she'd done herself. The bruises that once marked her legs and arms had begun to fade, the colors softening, but her eyes, they hadn't faded one bit. If anything, they burned clearer than before, sharper, like she saw the world without flinching now. I knelt by the stove, adding another splash of water to the kettle. The heat from the fire warmed my hands, but it was her presence I felt more than anything. The steady hum of her breathing, the way she watched me without suspicion, not expecting anything, not waiting for the other shoe to drop, just watching. When I glanced over my shoulder, she caught me, and this time, I didn't look away. "You didn't stop me," she said, her voice soft but sure, when I stepped outside. "I'd never stop you from standing up for yourself," I said. She studied my face like she was memorizing it. Then her gaze dropped to the floor for a moment, not out of shame, just thoughtfulness. "I've never done that before," she whispered. "Not like that. I've fought before. I've screamed. I've run. But I've never stood still and made them hear me." "You did clean," I said again, quieter this time. She nodded like she needed to hear it twice. Then slow and careful, she crawled across the floor until she was beside me. Her knees brushed my thigh. She didn't ask permission, didn't hesitate, just came to where she wanted to be. "Wyatt," she said. I looked at her, really looked. The way her shoulders relaxed, the way her voice didn't tremble anymore. "I'm not going anywhere." I let those words sit between us for a breath, then another. I reached up, brushed a loose strand of hair behind her ear, let my thumb rest at her cheek for just a second longer than needed. Her skin was warm. "Steady." "I know," I said. "I believe you." She leaned into my hand just slightly, a small gesture, but I felt it like a wave, and then she said it, not rushed, not breathless, just honest. "I mean it." There was a quiet that followed, but it wasn't silence. It was full, lived in, the kind of quiet you can rest inside. I didn't speak. Neither did she. We just sat there, breathing the same air, firelight flickering on the walls. After a while, she shifted closer. The blanket slipped from her shoulders. That old shirt she wore clung to her in the softest places. She didn't shy from the way my eyes found her. She didn't shrink. Her hands came up, slow and gentle, settling on my chest. "I don't want to be afraid of you," she said. "You don't have to be," I answered. "I'd rather die than be the thing you fear." Her fingers curled slightly, resting flat over the beat of my heart. I knew she could feel it, strong, solid, and real. She looked at me, deep and steady. "I don't want anything from you," she whispered, "but I don't want to feel like I flinch every time someone gets close." "Then we go slow," I said. "We move when you move." She nodded. Then she stepped into that space between us, leaned forward. Her lips touched mine, once soft, barely there. Just a question. I didn't pull away. I kissed her back, not deep, not hurried, just real. When we broke apart, her hands slid up to my shoulders, then around my neck. She pulled me close again, and this time there was more behind it. Not just relief, not just safety, want, warm, honest want, the kind that says, "This time, it's mine to give." She said those words too, whispered them against my mouth like a vow. "This time, it's mine." I didn't answer out loud, just held her. Let my hands rest gentle at her waist, careful not to grip too tight. I moved slow, always slow, letting her set the pace, letting her feel every inch of control she'd fought so hard to reclaim. When she pressed against me, I let her. When she pulled me down beside her, I followed. We didn't speak after that, didn't need to. What passed between us wasn't loud. It wasn't fireworks or thunder. It was warm skin and quiet breath, and the kind of closeness that asks nothing but presence. Later, when the fire dimmed and we laid side by side beneath the same old blanket, her head tucked beneath my chin, my arm around her, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Not comfort, not rest, peace, not the kind you borrow, not the kind you fake, but the kind you earn after everything else has been stripped away and something worth holding finds its way back in. Spring didn't show up all at once. It crept in quiet, like it was being careful not to wake anything too fast, but I felt it. In the ground first, damp under my boots in places that used to crack like eggshells when you stepped wrong. Then in the breeze, still sharp in the mornings, but carrying a softness behind it. Then in the color-tiny blades of green, pushing through the dry brush along the creek bed. It wasn't loud, it wasn't much, but it was enough to call something back to life, and not just the land. It started small. Mornings didn't feel so heavy anymore. I'd wake to the smell of coffee already brewing, Nora humming something tuneless under her breath while she moved about the cabin. She always rose before the sun, bare feet padding across the floor, sleeves rolled to her elbows. That shirt of mine, still too big, still worn like armor, looked different on her now. Not like something borrowed, like something chosen. I'd stand on the porch with my cup in hand, watching the light stretch over the hills, and I'd hear her inside, her soft footsteps, the clink of tin or a drawer being opened. And for the first time in longer than I could remember, I didn't feel alone even when I wasn't being spoken to. She was there, moving through the same quiet with me, not asking for more than the day gave, not running from it either. She started tending the patch of dirt just off the porch, didn't say anything about it, just knelt one morning with her hands in the soil, digging with her fingers like she'd done it 100 times before. She pulled up wild roots, scattered seeds, planted tiny onions she'd foraged near the creek. I watched from a distance at first, leaning against the post, letting her have the space. But she never told me to go, never looked up like I was intruding, just kept her hands moving slow and steady, like the act of growing something was enough to remind her she was still here. "You thinking of making a farm out of my front yard?" I asked one day, smiling behind the rim of my cup. She looked over her shoulder, dirt on her cheek, eyes bright. "Depends," she said. "You got a better place for a garden?" I didn't. The next day, she found an old iron skillet in the shed, forgotten under a pile of rusted hinges and broken saddle straps. She brought it in like it was gold. "I can cook something decent with this," she said, holding it like a prize. "Everything you've made's been decent," I told her. "You haven't tasted what I can really cook yet," she grinned, and it was the kind of grin that made the room feel warmer than the fire ever could. I built her a bench from scrap wood the day after that. Nothing fancy, just something to sit on by the edge of her little garden patch. I didn't tell her it was for her. Just set it there and went back to mending the fence like it wasn't a thing. She didn't say anything either, not at first. Just sat on it the next morning with a tin of water beside her and hummed while she worked. We were finding something together. Not just comfort, not survival, a rhythm, a way of moving through the day that made the cabin feel less like a shelter and more like a home. She still curled into me some nights, her head tucked under my chin, breath soft and even. And sometimes we didn't speak a word before sleep took us, but the silence wasn't empty anymore. It was full of everything we didn't need to explain. The bruises had faded, but her eyes still carried that depth, the kind that only comes from walking through fire. She was healing, but she hadn't forgotten. Neither had I. But now, when I watched her gather wild greens or set a pot to boil over the fire, I didn't see someone just surviving. I saw a woman making her life again, one quiet choice at a time. One evening, she stepped outside barefoot, basket in hand, the sky behind her all painted in gold and lavender. She was humming, off-key but soft, and I just stood there for a while, leaning on the gate, watching her walk through the grass like she belonged there. "You're not wearing boots," I said. She smiled over her shoulder. "I like the grass." I nodded, heart full. "Yeah, me too." That night, she made onion stew with hard bread. No meat, but it didn't need any. It was warm, rich, and tasted like something made with care. We ate by lamplight, the shadows dancing across her face, her braid falling loose over one shoulder. After, she sat in my lap on the porch, the blanket wrapped around us both, her hands resting at my chest, her head leaned into me like she had nothing left to prove, no mask to wear. "You ever think you'd have something like this again?" she asked, voice low. I looked down at her, brushed my thumb along the line of her jaw. "No." She nodded, thought on that for a while. Then she said, "Do you want to?" I didn't pause. I didn't think. I just answered, "I already do." She smiled, not wide, but deep, like it came from somewhere inside that hadn't had a reason to smile in years. Then she leaned in and said it, plain and honest. "I love you, Wyatt." I let it settle in the space between us, warm and true. Then I said it back, just as plain. "I love you too." The days started stretching longer after that, like time itself had softened. The kind of light that lingers in the evenings, touches everything slow. We fell into a rhythm, not planned, not spoken, just lived. Mornings came with the smell of coffee and the scrape of Nora's boots across the porch as she checked her garden. I'd be out near the shed by then, mending something that didn't really need mending, just for the excuse to stay near the sound of her humming. She didn't always hum the same tune, and she never seemed to mind that she couldn't hold it quite right. That was part of the charm. Off-key, but full of heart, just like everything else she did. By summer, the back shed was fully repaired. We did it together, mostly in silence, trading tools between us with nothing more than a glance or a nod. She'd gotten used to the hammer in her hand, the rhythm of swinging and setting boards in place. Her palms had toughened some, still soft underneath, but with a grit now. The kind that gets earned, the kind no one can take from you. She started painting the inside walls of the cabin in little sections, dabbing wildflower color with leftover brushes she found in the drawer by the stove. Just little things, half a vine curling around the window frame, a splash of yellow behind the shelf. At first, I didn't know what to say. I'd lived in that space for years, let it stay blank because blank was easier. But seeing her brush that color on the wood like it belonged, I found myself standing still more often, just watching. We never talked about staying, neither of us asked, neither of us needed to. She was already planting roots, and I was already waking each day expecting her voice, her steps, the weight of her in my arms by nightfall. There was no ceremony to it, no need. We were here. That was enough. I traded with a neighbor 3 ridges over, a man who owed me a favor from the war, for an old mule that limped on one side but still knew how to pull. Paid with firewood and one of my spare rifles, brought it back down the ridge myself, let Nora name him. She called him Grain, said it sounded stubborn enough to match his spirit. I laughed harder than I had in a long time when she said that, and she grinned like maybe she hadn't heard laughter in the right way for years. We built a small pen out back and started talking about getting a few hens before the first frost. She wanted to try her hand at making butter. I told her she'd need a churn for that, and she said, "Then I guess you better build one, mister." That became her way of saying things light, teasing, but never mean. Just enough to let me know she was glad to be here and glad I was here with her. At night, she still curled beside me, same bedroll, same blanket, though more than once we'd wake tangled together, her head resting in the curve of my shoulder, her hand settled at my chest. Sometimes we made love, slow and quiet, like the kind of thing that doesn't need words. Other nights, we just held each other, breathing in the same rhythm, letting the dark pass by without having to explain where we'd been before. I found her one morning out near the old cedar stump, with her hands in the dirt and a line of tiny green shoots coming up where none had grown in years. She didn't notice me at first, just kept whispering to the plants as she worked, telling them they were doing good, that the sun would be back soon. I leaned against the fence and watched her barefoot in the soil, hair falling over her shoulder, face lit up like she belonged to the land. "You talking to weeds now?" I asked. She looked up, smiling. "They ain't weeds if they're growing where they're wanted." I didn't have a response for that, just walked over, knelt beside her, and pressed my palm into the warm dirt. She reached out and laid her hand over mine, laced our fingers together right there in the soil. That was our kind of prayer. Not spoken, not bowed, just being. Sometimes I'd catch her sitting on that old bench I built for her, basket of greens in her lap, watching the horizon like she was waiting for the next chapter to arrive. But she never looked scared, just thoughtful, like someone who knew the worst might come again, but finally believed she had the strength to face it. And I did too. Not once in those long, quiet days did either of us ask the other if we were staying. We didn't need to. We already had. The wind changed near the end of summer, not in a way most folks would notice, but I did. There was a softness to it now, a warmth that carried across the fields in the early hours and stayed in the soil even after the sun dropped. The sky stayed clearer longer, and the land, like everything else around here, had begun to breathe again. So had I. We'd done more than survive out here. Somewhere between the aching nights and quiet mornings, between the weight of what she'd been through and the silence I used to call home, we'd built something we didn't have a name for, didn't need one. It wasn't built on vows or rules or any kind of debt. It was built on choice, on presence, on the simple, steady decision to stay. Nora was in the garden that morning, her knees tucked under her, boots kicked off beside the bench I'd built. She was humming again, that same off-key tune that had started as a whisper and now came through easy, like it belonged here. She had her sleeves rolled, hands in the dirt, tugging weeds with the kind of care most people don't give anything anymore. I stood by the fence and watched her for a while, the sun catching in her hair, her skin glowing with sweat and purpose. She looked up, smiled when she saw me watching. "What?" she said, brushing a strand of hair off her forehead. "Nothing," I said. "Just you." She rolled her eyes like she was used to me being a fool and went back to the soil, but she was smiling when she did. That was enough. Somewhere along the way, I stopped waiting for the bad to come back. Used to be, every quiet day felt borrowed, like trouble was just over the next ridge, biding its time. But it hadn't come, and even if it did, we weren't the same people anymore. She wasn't scared, and I wasn't hollow. That made all the difference. Inside, the cabin looked different too, not in any big way, but in the way things feel when they're lived in. There was color on the walls now, a half-finished vine Nora had been painting, curling above the hearth. her apron hanging by the stove, a basket of wild herbs drying on the shelf. My rifle still leaned in the corner, but these days it wasn't the first thing my hand reached for in the morning. We had a rhythm, a quiet, working rhythm. She'd make the stew, I'd chop the wood. She'd sort the seeds for fall, I'd ride to the neighbors for feed. Some nights we'd talk, slow and soft, about things we remembered or things we never wanted to again. Other nights we didn't speak at all, just let the fire fill the space between us. But even in the silence I could feel it, her presence, steady beside me, and the knowing that neither of us had plans to be anywhere else. There are lessons I've learned, but most of them weren't quick, like how peace ain't something that shows up loud. It comes in slow, wears a quiet face, looks like a woman humming in the garden, or a warm meal after a long day, or the soft way someone says your name like they mean it. Or this one, love doesn't always show up when you're ready for it. It shows up when you least expect it, hands bruised, voice hoarse, heart half torn open. And when it does, you've got a choice. You can shut the door and keep your silence, or you can open it, make room, and let the healing start where the pain left off. I chose her, and every day since, she's chosen me too. Not because she had to, not because I saved her, but because she saw who I was, and I saw her, and we both decided that was enough. And it is. Some nights, when the stars are sharp and the air still warm, we sit on the porch wrapped in a blanket, her head tucked into my shoulder, and we watch the wind move through the grass. She'll lean close and whisper something soft, nothing urgent, nothing grand. Just little things, like how the onions came up stronger this week, or how she's thinking of painting bluebells near the window. I listen, I always do, and sometimes I tell her the truth in return. You changed everything, I say. She'll look at me, half smile, and say, so did you. If you're hearing this now, if this story found you somehow, I hope you take something with you when it's done. Maybe it's this. Don't measure love by what it demands. Measure it by what it gives without asking. And don't wait for peace to come knocking. Sometimes you got to carry it home yourself, bloody, bruised, tired, but yours. And if you find someone out there who doesn't flinch when you're quiet, who sees you for who you are and doesn't try to fix you, just stays, hold on to them. That kind of love doesn't come twice. If this story meant something to you, if you saw pieces of yourself in it, go ahead and like the video, leave a comment, and follow the channel. I reckon there's more folks out there who need to be reminded, no matter where you've been or what you've survived, it's never too late to be loved right. Not someday, not almost, now.